Hello my friends, Paul here in the RoJoBe Music Workshop, and welcome to I think this is only the second Luthier tutorial technique videos I've made. So I did say at the end of last year that I was going to do videos on, you know, luthier tips, techniques, little jobs for instruments. Now, this is certainly the first one I've done since March of this year, 2025, 4 months ago. And that one was the acoustic guitar bridge removal and reattachment. I think that's the first one I did. I may have done another one, but no, I wouldn't have done. So that's the only one I've done this year, and that was back in March. So, you know, I haven't done any more since then because I've had so many other projects on the go. You know, there was the Tumby build project, which was quite a difficult project in some respects. And bear in mind, I made, was it 5 I made of them, or 6? 5. I made 5 of them. And you know, then there was my latest one, the electric guitar handmade build project. I think there was 1 or 2 more as well. So I haven't done any of these tutorials, as I said, for 4 months, and I think this might only even be the second one. So this one is making a new nut for your instrument. Now I'm going to be making a new nut for a mandolin. However, the same principles apply whether you're making a nut for a guitar, a ukulele, not violin because they're a bit different, but you know, most stringed instruments that have a nut, the principle for making them is pretty much the same. Obviously, things that change are the dimensions, the width, the height, the thickness, the amount of strings, the spacing of the strings, but the technique, the principles are the same, regardless of what nut you're making for what instrument. So, as I said, I'm doing this for one of my bowlback mandolins. Now, bear in mind, I've got 6 of these. I've got 5 for sale and 1 that's mine, or you know, one that I converted to left-handed for myself. So, the reason I'm making a new nut for this mandolin, if I just show you, try and show you up close. If you look very carefully at the spacing between the strings, we've pretty much got the same amount of space between all of the strings, which is not correct. I mean, any of you that play any instrument, whether it's ukulele or guitar or mandolin, each string, or each, you know, 2 strings will have a certain amount of space between them so that the strings are spaced out evenly. Well, as you can see on this one, they're pretty much all the same, and that's completely wrong, especially on such a small instrument, you know, where everything is close together anyway. The string spacing, the frets, you know, everything is already close together. That's no good. And I've been meaning to do this job for months. Just haven't got round to it until now being the end of July. So this is the one I'm going to be changing the nut on, and I've got another one of them here. So if we have a look at that one, you look at the string spacing there, that is correct. So we've got a very small gap between each pair of strings, but a bigger gap between the pairs, if that makes sense. Okay, so each of these strings in pairs, it's got a very, very small gap between them, and then a bigger gap to the next pair of strings. That's how it should be. Okay, that's correct. That is not. That is no good. And because, as I said, because everything's close together on these anyway, you know, this way and this way, you need quite nimble fingers to play these, really. So, you know, that just makes it impossible to play properly. And obviously, you know, especially for beginners who will play just the first 4 or 5 frets, you know, that's it's just impossible. So this is getting a new nut. So let me just put that other one out of the way a bit. I've already got the strings loosened off. So I'm going to set it down on the bench, get the camera lined up so that you can see what I'm doing. And hold on, that way. Maybe zoom in a little bit. Let's see. Yeah, just a touch. Okay. So I've got all the strings loosened off. I now need to remove the bridge. Now on mandolins, the bridge is floating, it's not fixed. So that will just, it's a bit stuck actually. Here we go. There we go. So it's just stuck to the finish a little bit. Well, that's okay because it will give us a witness mark as to where it needs to go back. So as I said, on mandolins it's a floating bridge. So I can just take that out. And it has actually left some marks on the body there. Not ideal, but as I said, that's where the bridge will be going back anyway, so that shouldn't be a problem. But I might try and touch that up with a little bit of varnish or lacquer before I put it back together. I don't know yet. We'll see. It's taken a little bit of the lacquer off the top, so I'll probably retouch that later. Right, so I'll put the bridge out of the way so I don't lose that or damage it. You can see how thin and delicate that is. And, you know, I believe that's probably rosewood. The older ones would have been ebony, perhaps, or something like that. That's probably rosewood, and that saddle, which is mounted in there, is bone. And the nut is bone, and I'm going to be replacing it with a bone nut. If you're making a nut from scratch, I would highly recommend you make it from bone, not plastic. You know, you can buy plastic nuts, and usually they'll fit quite well, but for these style of mandolins, the bowl back, you might struggle to find a nut for one of these. And there's nothing more satisfying than making something for an instrument rather than buying it. You know, I mean, a plastic nut for one of these, if you can get one, it would be pennies. But where's the satisfaction in that? So I have here a piece of bone which is cut to the approximate length, or width rather, so this way, and thickness, I'm going to say that way, but the height is very much higher, so that will need to be adjusted. And at the moment it's basically just a square blank or rectangle blank, cuboid if you like. It's just a blank, and as I said, I've cut it to the approximate size, and it's bone. It's probably calf bone, or possibly, yeah, I would say it probably is calf bone. So strings are loose, bridge is out. So what I need to do is move all the strings out of the nut. Oh, one more thing before I do that. If you look very carefully, so this is the nut here, and these are the frets, but if you look there, right up behind the nut is a 0 fret. Now, I'm not sure how common that is on mandolins, especially these older ones. As I said, I've got 6 of these, and this is the only one that has a 0 fret. Now, in some respects, that will kind of make it easier for making this nut, because the nut slots, in the case of where you have a 0 fret, all they do is keep the correct spacing with the strings. The nut itself, for its normal purpose, is kind of redundant because of this 0 fret. So that's where the strings make contact on that 0 fret, and that is effectively your nut. So what the nut does in this case is it just keeps the correct spacing. It doesn't actually act as a nut as such. And like I said, I don't know how common that is on mandolins. I've not seen that before. I don't think it's particularly common. Anyway, so in some respects it will make it a bit easier because so long as I put all the slots lower than that 0 fret so that the strings are resting on the 0 fret, that's fine. But I do still need it to be accurate. And obviously if you don't have a 0 fret, the depth of your slots have to be absolutely spot on for your intonation. For your string action. The height of the string above the 1st fret. But, as I said, with the 0 fret, that does it for you. So the strings need to rest on that 0 fret, and then the string height at the 1st fret is automatically correct. So, like I said, in some respects that makes it a bit easier to make this nut because all I need to do is put the slots or grooves lower than that 0 fret. But it does still need to be accurate. So, you know, the way I'm making this is be exactly the same way I would make it if it didn't have a 0 fret. So, enough waffling about that. So let's take the strings out of the nut, and I've measured the width of this nut. I'll just do it again with my calipers. Set them to 0. So we're set at 0. So if I now, actually let's put those strings up out of the way. If I now measure the width of this nut as accurately as I can, let's get it to there. So we're looking at 27.94 millimeters. Now I've cut this pretty much the same. I think you'll agree that's pretty close. 27.98. It is actually, that's not quite straight. Yeah. So there you go, showing 27.99 now. So we're going to call that 28 millimeters. There you go, it's just popped up again. These calipers are not the best in the world. So it is, I mean, I've measured this several times. It is exactly 28 millimeters. And you know, that's quite important for working out where my nut slots are going to be. So what I've got here is I've got a diagram of this particular nut. So it's blown up, basically 10 times its size, and you know, this whole black line represents the nut, and the red lines represent the strings and subsequently string slots. So you can see I've taken the measurements, and every single gap, right from the edge of the nut to the first string, or sorry, the 4th string in this case, all the way across, the spacing is the same, 3.1 millimeters from the end of the nut, both sides, to the 1st and the 4th string, and the gaps between all of the strings is exactly the same, 3.1 millimeters. Wrong, that's no good. Now, I've drawn another diagram of what it should be like. Okay, so you can already see that you've got each pair of strings close together, but a larger gap between them. So the gap from each end of the nut to the 1st and the 4th string should be 3 millimeters, with a gap between each pair of strings 2.5 millimeters, and then the gap to the next pair of strings 4 millimeters. So you can see that's how it should be. 3 millimeters at each end, 4 millimeters between each pair of strings, and 2.5 millimeters between each string in the pair. So let's just compare those two. So the bottom one is wrong, and we've got no light here. Actually, that's not too bad. The bottom one is wrong, The top one is how it should be. So that's how I'm going to do the measurements. Right, so let's take this nut out. It shouldn't take a lot. It looks like it's just glued on the surface. It's not in a groove in the in the neck itself. So that'll just take a little tap, and that'll come out. We'll just use that chisel. Just tap it by hand. It doesn't stay still. That should just pop out, he says. Right, let me just put that down there. And what can I use as a hammer? Everything's a hammer, we know that. How about a big spanner? There you go, and that's just popped out. So that's the old nut off. And if I just have a look here where the nut was, it's obviously there's no finish or varnish on that part there, because that's where you do put a little dab of glue on there to hold it on. So before I do anything, I'm just going to clean that up a little bit. There's just a little bit of glue left on there. So I'll get a bit of, let's say 600. I'll just clean that up a bit. Just clean off that excess glue. I don't want to take anything off the surface, you know, any wood off the surface, just clean off the glue. It's probably not quite coarse enough. Let's get some 320. That should do it. Let's get those strings right out of the way. Actually, I've got a piece of string here. I'll just tie those back. So I'll keep them well out of the way. That's better. Right, let's get those strings right out of the way. Okay, that's fine. That's fine. Right, there's my 320. Right. Just get a small chisel just to pick out the rest of that little bit of glue in there. That's got it. That's better. Nice and clean now. As I said, I don't want to remove any material, any wood. Just cleaning off the glue. It looks like it's super glue or something like that. Okay. Yeah, a little bit more. So it is important to make sure that you've got the surfaces nice and clean for when you glue it back in. Okay, so let me just take some measurements with my calipers of the old nut. So that's gone off. So width 27.72, and the new one is, to all intents and purposes, 28 millimeters. And it doesn't matter if it sticks out the end a little bit, it's going to be like 1/4 of a millimeter, like 10th thou. Okay, so the thickness, so this is from front to back, is, let's see, I've got about 4.4 mil. I'll just check the other end. Sometimes they're not very consistent. Yeah, so it's down to 4.2 mil. And the thickness of the new one, I think you'll agree that's pretty close. Yeah, bang on. Now the height, so the old nut is 4.8, and again it's not going to be consistent. Well, it is about 4.8. Now the height of the new one is currently 5.9, so it's about 1 millimeter higher than the old one. That's fine. You want to start high and, you know, sneak up on it. It actually looks like a lot more than 1 millimeter, but that appears to be what it is. Maybe like 1.1, 1.2 millimeters. So I'm just going to test fit that now into that area, slot if you like, and that looks beautiful. Fits in there really nice. There's a little bit of glue on the end of the fretboard just there. I'm just going to scrape that off with a chisel. Yeah, I can't even see it. I could see that the nut was standing away from it a bit, and that I could feel it, but it's such a minute amount I couldn't even see it. Right, let me just have a look at that now. And oh yeah. Wait, perhaps just a tiny bit more right on the end, but I've got to be careful not to chip that fretboard. So just carefully, probably better if I go down that way. Right. Let's have a look at that now. I know you can't really see what I'm doing too well, but yeah, that's it. Good, okay. So I'm just going to put it in place and check for width, make sure it's not sticking out too much, because I want to keep this at 28 millimeters so that I can get my measurements spot on. And you know, I can just, once it's in place and I've done all the slots, I can just soften the edges a bit, you know, just file them a bit smoother so that they transition from the fretboard without any problem. And it's actually looking pretty much bang on. I mean, I can see that there is literally a fraction of overhang both sides, not even half a millimeter. Like I said, probably 10 thou each side. It's so minimal. And I can, you know, I can soften the edges of that, you know, sanding it, and I won't need to lose any width so that my measurements will be good. Okay, so that's the nut kind of ready to be, you know, to be shaped and slotted and put in, but I'm running out of time, so this will be a two-parter, possibly more. And yeah, so the next part I'll be starting to actually the first thing I'll do is I'll measure all of the string spacing, and you know, I'll measure it along the top and put thin pencil lines where those slots should be. Not going to do any cuts yet, because obviously I want to make sure it is right. So that will be the next part. I'll be measuring and marking the string slots with a fine pencil, and we'll go from there. Okay, so hope you're enjoying these various videos that I'm putting out. I am going to be doing another tutorial video on another mandolin at a later stage, obviously once I've finished this. So that will be another one to look forward to. In the meantime, please look after yourselves, look after each other. We will see you soon. Peace out.